Good afternoon from Seattle. Good evening from
St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul. I forgot the town you're in. This is Therapy Unscripted, and we are Dr. Reverend Sean Moore. Nope, I screwed that up. Reverend Dr. Sean Moore.
It's all good.
He got his PhD in reconciliation
Yes,
and teaches seminars and leads workshops.
indeed.
Also getting his license in marriage and family counseling.
Yes.
So I am a licensed mental health associate in the state of Washington and Oregon, and with a specialty in helping survivors of spiritual and domestic violence, spiritual abuse, and domestic violence
It's okay.
rebuild their identity. So, we're here today to give you kind of some of our tips, our tricks, our tools, and just have a general discussion about mental health. We don't intend this to be therapy. It is not a good replacement for individualized mental health, but we would be happy to help you find somebody who could be part of your individual therapy. So
Yes,
feel free to reach out. We have lots of resources and are constantly building more. So
indeed.
today we're going to talk about intent versus impact within relationships, with a specific emphasis on the anxiety that kind of comes up around relationships and the difficulty that some relationships can be. So we'll go ahead and get started. Sean, did you have anything to add to what I said?
No, I just wanted to.
Watched.
It's all good. It's all good. Right? It's unscripted. It's off the cuff, and so we're just gonna lay it out there and just have a conversation. Yeah, that's it. I mean, this is supposed to be raw and real, and so
Yeah.
the idea of it being perfect is unacceptable because we don't live perfect lives.
Yeah. Life is long and complicated. So
Yes.
here we go.
Yeah.
Intent versus impact, and we're gonna kind of talk about two different things: intent versus impact within healthy relationships, and intent versus impact within abusive and oppressive relationships. And then at the very end, we have some skills to sort of that we like using, or that we've seen with clients work well with clients, and we'll briefly describe that. So, intent in healthy relationships. So, intent is what we bring to the relationship, our feelings and emotions towards others. That's my definition of intent. It's kind of how I feel about the person I'm interacting with. So you can have different intent for different people. You can have a general intent based on your own personal values and the way you believe you should live in the world. But where intent is concerned, it's often confused with impact. And so people assume the intent of the other. So, for instance, Sean may look at me with a funky face, and I can't rightfully assume, oh my gosh, Sean, why do you hate me? Because he might have something in his eye, or he might be falling asleep because he had a really long day that day. So intent comes from inside me and can't, within healthy relationships, and can't really be deduced based on simple actions. The person themselves has to tell you their intent.
Yeah. I when I think about the idea of intention, I always think about a box of cereal, right? If it's Wheaties, so what you expect inside the box is a box of Wheaties. So you open the box and you pour out, and here comes Wheaties. So it's what's inside, like you were saying. It's actually what's inside. Like, I want to produce this thing, so I'm going to give this to you. Uh, Impact might be how Wheaties impacts my digest system, or the way it smells, or the way it looks, or whatever it is. So it's always an interesting thing of navigating with others, whether it's in a relationship or not. The idea of, here is what I intended, and then here's my impact. But to be able to do both well, my intention with my impact, an individual has to know the other. Like, what is it about the other that I know or unaware of? That way, when I'm trying to be intentional, that its impact is what it should be, and nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it. And then something that I was thinking about a lot of, my intent can be way different than my impact. I can intend towards people a very gracious, wonderful, loving intent, but if my actions and my demeanor don't communicate that, the felt impact on other people can be actually kind of harsh.
Yeah, yeah. I think healthy relationships, regardless of what degree they're in, there has to be an ideology of uh, its impact on the other person. So you have to know them well enough to be able to say and do certain things. It's the idea. I think it's like comedy, right? And so a comedian has to know his or her audience, and they have to have good timing,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know the audience and have really bad timing and not get the joke, or you can have really good timing and not know the audience, and it still falls flat. There's an idea of timing, and also audience. Like, what do I actually know about this individual that I'm dealing with? Which I think this is one of the core issues that we have in building relationships, because so much of the time I call frozen. Like, we have what's inside of us dipped inside ice cubes, and until you leave the ice cube on the counter and let the ice cube like melt away, you have this core. But most of the time, the outside is to appease those that are around us. Like, and only until you melt away, you get to realize, this is what I'm dealing with. This is who I am. This is who I am actually. This is who I actually am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have a like practical example of how that plays out?
I think in relationships with
Yeah.
individuals. Yeah. Okay. So it would be the idea of so I played football in high school, and one of the big things on a Saturday night or Friday night was to go out after the game. So we would probably get back to the school around like 8 o'clock, 8:30. And then we would always go out to do something. And there were a few individuals that would lead this pack of whatever it was. And so the idea was, people would go out and they would do these things and engage in activities that were appropriate, some that weren't appropriate. But we found out that we really didn't want to engage in them. We didn't really want to do the things that we were doing. We stayed. It was best for me to pretend this was awesome and cool, and not really want to participate, because after you don't want to be left out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't want anyone to dislike you. Oh, well, you're too good to hang out with us and do whatever else. So we're afraid of those things. And so we put on this, oh, I'll do this thing.
Mhm.
And so it really isn't that I want to, it's just I want to be accepted. And so I think that's also a major issue as it relates to engaging with otherness is number
Mhm.
one, we all feel the need to have contact with others in some sort. And I recognize certain behaviors, or I might believe certain behaviors might distance you from me, so that I'm going to respond in an appropriate way. So when we get into the toxic relationships,
Mhm.
you don't have a sign that says, "Hey, I'm toxic. I'm going to cause you harm." You have just the opposite. Hey, I'm friendly. I'm nice, and so you buy into what you see, and then after this slow, this decision, like, oh, this is a toxic relationship. I didn't recognize it was toxic when I got into this, but I recognize it now.
Mhm.
I think.
Well, that's a great segue into the intent versus impact within abusive and oppressive relationships. Of in healthy relationships, we say don't judge intent because only the person talking to you can tell you their intent. And if you constantly judge intent, then you destroy the relationship because you're almost always wrong when you're judging intent based on your own resentment or your own hurts. But in the relationships, in the abusive and in the oppressive relationships, you desperately need to make observations and look at the patterns and follow what people are saying and how their actions line up against that, and how that will tell you what their intent is.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's like Sherlock Holmes, right? All the clues say this, right? Then most likely that's what it is, right? If
Mm-hmm.
all the clues line up this way, it's almost always that. And I think for myself, a big indicator of something not being good or something being toxic or not good for me, especially when it comes to oppressing, is power and authority. Um,
Mm.
Power is the means to do something, no matter what it is, just the means to do it. Authority is the right to do it. Anytime you separate those two from one another in a person, they're being oppressed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whenever you take away their authority or their right and their means to do something, even if it's something that you think is appropriate, it would be the idea of someone keeping someone from going out to see their friends. Um, Spend the night spend the night here or be with me. Let's do this together. Let's not go do that. You're always with your friends, and there's this subtleness of keeping a person away from there, or the idea of gaslighting them into believing that they're crazy to some
Mm-hmm.
sort of. And so these are subtle things that kind of split power and authority. But whenever you have a split in power and authority, almost, I mean, it's always, there's nothing that says you can split someone's power and authority and not oppress them.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. So let me see if I'm kind of understanding that quite how you're intending to communicate it. Is there's power, the ability to do something, and authority, the right to do something. And if you take away the ability to do something, you are creating a control dynamic.
Yes.
Mm.
Either one, taking away power or means. And so all you got to do is stand between those two and just press them apart. Just
Mm.
kind of press them apart. So you may have the authority to do something, but I take away the power to do so. You may have the power to do it, but then I'm going to take away your authority. And you don't recognize that your power or your authority is being removed because it's very subtle. And then when you look back, you go, oh my goodness, I can't believe these steps of how I lost my power. And it's like, you're not going to do these things. It's very subtle, a very
Yeah.
subtle uh, road.
A little bit at a time and a little bit at a time. And I think that speaks to what you mentioned earlier is oftentimes it happens in a relationship where the person slowly losing their power doesn't notice it because the relationship is so important to them.
Right.
So they're willing to sacrifice a little bit at first, a very little bit. It's just being kind is usually what the first step is just being kind. And that gives up just a little bit of power and a little bit of power. And that's why it's so important to watch the patterns and make observations about what is said, what is done, what happens after there's a big event. Is there this sudden rash of behavior towards repair, but does that repair last? And so those are just some of the things that I think about.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, we've gone pretty deep.
Yeah, so I think the thing that strikes me now is repair. Like how do you repair um, the splitting of power and authority, and can you actually repair a toxic relationship that you got into,
Yeah.
or you friendships, co-workers,
Yeah.
any of those things? Because even if it's a job, you say, "Oh, I'm going to quit." If you're accustomed to engaging in these types of activities, this circular type of rites, rituals, traditions that get reinforced inside of you, you'll find another place that'll just replace the other one and not know it. Oh, I didn't realize it.
Yep. It'll feel way different at the beginning. You're like, oh, finally, I found a great place. And then months or years or weeks, however long it takes, you're like, oh no, this is the same. And it contributes to that crazy feeling.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's your tips and tricks for not repeating the same cycle?
Well, again, I'm big into movies and things like that that can make me whatever. But I always think about these Mad Max movies where everything is desolate and whatever else. And there's always a scene where there's toxic water, right? It has a certain smell, a certain flavor, a certain taste. And then there's always some characters who like, I don't care. I'm gonna drink the poison water. And they eventually die because of the drinking poison, but they're like, I'm so thirsty, I need to drink this. But again, I think when you look at the lead character who they test the water or they boil it or they do something to the water to get the water to where they can ingest it. Now, I think step one is to ask, uh, what is my power and authority for me to be the best that I need to be? So what do I need to be the best person that I can be, and figure out what that is, and then compare that to what you're actually doing. Like, these things aren't good for me, and yet I'm still doing this, which is not good for me. Which goes back to just being mindfulness, right? The wise mind. It's the between the intellectual uh, uh, and the rational. Just how do I piece together something that's what's best for me, and then you start setting out to do so. And if the relationship can handle that, well, then that's good. If it doesn't, then you should go, because again, um, it's the idea of how do I become the best that I can be. That's best for me, because you're literally, if you're going to pour into someone, you only have so much in your glass you can pour until you're empty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the analogy of, okay, I'm spinning out on all these great ideas you just talked about. So let's go way back to the toxic water. It's such a good analogy because oftentimes when you get into a new situation, you're so excited about getting into this new situation. It looks so healthy and delicious and wonderful. And it might be a new work. It might be a new relationship. It might be a new friendship. It might be rekindling with a family member. Um, and so you kind of rush into it because in the analogy, you're thirsty. You're dying of thirst and you desperately need. And so knowing your needs is a really, really great way to sort of pause yourself instead of rushing into something that will fulfill or looks like it will fulfill that need. Knowing your needs beforehand sort of puts the brakes on of like, okay, I need to test this water before I drink it. I need to test this relationship before I get into it. I need to test how serious this family member is about reconciling with me or in their own actions. And then once I've begun to just test a little bit, and that's just a tiny little bit of vulnerability that you share with that person. And if they honor it, then you can give them a tiny little bit more. And if they don't honor it, well, then at least you only tested it on a tiny little piece.
Yeah. They have those little those strips of paper that you can dip in the water and then it changes
Yes.
color, right? So you're like,
Yes.
isn't like you can use a strip to test the water, or you go, oh, let me drink a whole entire glass. I'm gonna test the water. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna have a nice glass.
Mhm.
That's a little too much. A little strip might be what you need. And again, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that because I think it's part of the idea of growing with. I think relationships, all of them are based upon helping the other person achieve what they desire. Or I think something you said is that you want someone to be a witness
Yeah.
to a witness to your greatness and vice versa. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to help you. So the people that aren't going to help you, take away from it, chip you away, be negative, you eventually got to be like, yeah, this is not good for me or good for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, in my skill of the week, the one that I'm talking about with all my clients and working on with myself is um, an emotion chart. It's a simple little 9 by what's that size of paper? 8 by 12 or 8.5 by 12. Anyway,
Yep.
a sheet of paper that has all of the emotions listed out. Well,
Ah,
them, but a lot of them written out by category: anger, sadness, disappointment. I don't remember. And then there's a happy categories. And what I've been having my clients do and what I've been doing myself is just looking at that chart and saying, what am I feeling right in this minute? Because you'd be amazed how hard it is to accurately label your own emotions independent of blame on other people or situations. So instead of saying, they make me so mad, you're saying, I am incredibly frustrated right now. Or, man, I just love skiing. It makes me so excited. No, I am excited about skiing. And it helps you get inside yourself in a way that often we don't even think about paying attention to. And that information is extremely helpful in helping you pause before you get yourself into a situation and knowing and realizing what your needs are and beginning to be able to fulfill your needs within yourself and within your community instead of seeking relationships to fill that hole. Because when two people, friends, family members, intimate relationships come together, you will either magnify your weaknesses or you'll magnify your strengths. And how whole you are as a person will be what determines whether you're magnifying weaknesses or magnifying strengths.
that's really good. I like that. Yeah. Uplifting where you're strong, not where there's deficits.
Yeah.
It's living out the abundance lifestyle, not the scarcity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it's said with the cup, you have to be full in order to pour into somebody else. And if you are always spending time with people who are empty, then you're always going to be pouring and they're never going to be pouring back into you.
Yeah, for sure. I see this quite a bit in the church life, the
Mhm.
relationship of churches where there are individuals who make up particular congregations that literally suck the energy out of a space in a room. They don't give; they just take and take and take. And one of the ways in which you see this is an always complaining about something negative. There's nothing you reported good. It's like this is negative. Folks have to stop and then deal with that. So that kind of that energy, that negative energy, is what they suck off of and what they engage in, and they don't even recognize it. They think doing something positive. I've got a very watchful eye. This is a good thing. Like, no, it doesn't really. Yeah, that doesn't help.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you're the pastor. Nope, doesn't help. Nope, nothing. No.
Well, Sean, what skills do you have to add to this topic?
I think the skill that the first thing that comes to my mind was the chain of analysis.
Mm.
Number one, I like the visual aid of the chain of analysis. So the chain of analysis are you take again 8 by 13 piece of paper and you cut them the long way. You cut multiple strips. You get maybe 6 strips of paper off of one paper, and you start writing out the incident that took place. This took place. You write out the incident as it is, and then you link them together from the very first time to the very last time. And then as you're looking through each loop, you get to a point to where at what point in the chain was there something that went wrong? And so it might be you have maybe 15 of these loops locked together, and you realize after the 9th loop, this is what isn't okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you look at that 9th loop and you write another loop out that what
Yeah.
you could have done to make it better. Then you attach another link to that. What would have happened if you had done that? And then you link out what would happen with this new link. And you have 2 links now. You've got this long link, and then you have a shorter link. And the shorter link is what should have happened. And then what you do is you literally rip off the link where you had a problem, attach the new link, and then you have a different way of dealing with the same incident the second time around. When it might happen again, you go, oh, I need to do this thing now because this is what happened here. And so with the chain of analysis, you're always going through looking at how could I have done better here? And it's always about you. It isn't about other individuals. Like, what could I have done? And it can be as much as I should have said, you know what, mom, I can't talk. I have to hang up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Or kids, I need a break. So it's the idea of just recognizing at this point I had too much or I've taken too much, and I stayed in the moment and I allowed myself to slip off and to do negative things. But it's the idea of figuring out what part of the chain doesn't work and creating a new chain. And then literally, the thing that I like about it is that you're literally ripping off
Mm-hmm.
the old chain and putting on a new one. You're literally going no to this, yes to this. And that sticks in your head, right? And so for me, I would just say the chain of analysis is a really good tool. I use it quite a bit with my client.
That's really cool. So we have a couple of minutes yet. Can we go through a specific scenario and kind of list out what those chains would, what the little links would be? Say for I got frustrated with my kids. Can we start there or do we need to start further back?
Well, we would start back to everything leading up to that. Like,
Okay.
so let's say that you had to pick up your kids at a certain time.
Okay.
You said, I need to be, or you had to take your kids somewhere at a particular time. So here's an
Taking
incident.
them to school.
Yeah.
Okay.
So school starts at 8:10 or whatever it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to be out of the house with you in here. And so the incident begins at 8:25, which already like, uh-oh.
We're already 15 minutes late.
We're already 15 minutes late. And then everything after that becomes super short. So then you can begin with, why do we leave the house late? We left the house late because of these things. And then you can go, okay,
Yeah.
I could have done this. I could have done it's isn't about the other person. It's all about you, what you could have done differently. And that might just mean, you know what? I'm not going to take you. Or this is it just might end up being for me to have sound mind, I have to be able to do these things. And then you'll recognize it, right, wrong, or indifferent, your partners. But if you have a whole entire family working on the chain of analysis, then everyone can be like, oh, here's the problem right here.
Well, and that's really beautiful what you just said. If you have a whole entire family working on the chain of analysis, they're all working through these little steps saying, where could I act differently? That's a healthy relationship. That's a really excellent, beautiful relationship. If you have one family member who goes around tearing everybody else's links, that doesn't work.
No.
If you have one family member who is dictating what all the links that everyone has to do, that doesn't work. That's not a healthy relationship.
Oppressive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. And I'm visualizing links that I need to branch off of and tear off that end of the chain.
Yeah, it sounds weird. And you can, why can't I just do it in my own head? I can cut it I can link it in my own head. But literally, once you write it out,
Yeah.
you link them, and then you're literally like, yep, this right here. Number 6 was the breakdown and what took place. And so you look at 7, 8, 9, 10, you just see this was the event that created all these other things. And you can't change it because it's already happened. But what you can do is you can imagine creating a new 6, then a new 7, then a new 8, then a new 9, then a new 10. Then you just rip off the old 6, put the new 6 on, and you're like, okay, I've done this exercise now in my head. And you will remember exactly what happened because you're writing it, linking it, tearing apart. You're like, oh, wow. So you may have like 15, 20 of these huge, these big, thick chains that you think, oh, this is this. So it doesn't have to be particular to this thing. It can be something that this fits here also.
Well, and as you physically work with something, your brain remembers better. So there's a little bit of bilateral stimulation going on, which helps your brain make connections from different areas of its functioning. And you also are concretely writing out steps that helps your brain sort of sort out the details and refine it into one step instead of getting lost in all of the confusion and the complexity.
Right.
Life is a little crazy sometimes. And so putting it into steps and physically manipulating it is really helpful for your brain.
And if you really want to put a stamp or put the icing on the cake, you want to take
icing is amazing.
Yeah. Take either scented paper or some type of ointment that has a smell to it. And put this scented paper or these scents on the strips, because one way that our brains remember, like we have 5 senses, but for whatever reason, studies show that the sense of smell connected to something else, we will remember that much longer if it smells a particular way. So you can
that's brilliant.
Put lavender on. So the new chain will have the lavender chain, smells sweet, or cinnamon, or orange peel, like something that smells sweet to you. You won't forget the new chain with this new smell in it also, because it's hard to it's very hard to forget something that you've connected to by writing it out, constructing it, and then putting a scent to it.
And this is for the purpose of taking that new step the next time a similar situation arises.
Yeah, whatever your new smell is. All my new steps are going to have the smell of lavender or orange
Mm,
peel or cinnamon mist or whatever it is. The new steps will be that, and then you won't. It'll be like difficult to forget it.
that's really a great idea. Plus, then, if you use lavender, you might be a little more relaxed after it.
Right. Yeah. And again, that's why I think lavender is the perfect thing. I use lavender all the time. So I use lavender oil because it's my go-to thing.
Brilliant invention, for lack of a better word. Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you have anything else to add, Sean, before we wrap up?
Again, if you suspect that you are in a toxic relationship, whether intimate, friendship, family, the way to test it is just to ask. I think the way I would test it is to say, in any situation, do I have power and authority together in it? And if it's not equal, then you may have to take a look at it and go, ooh, when it comes to this, I don't really have a right to say no, or I have no ability to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you should be able to have the ability to say yes and no, regardless of the consequence. So again,
Yes.
the consequences will come after what you've decided. But again, if you don't have the right to have power and authority, it's worth looking into.
Yeah. You have the right to control your own life and change it if it is not a good life for you.
Right. Do
Yeah.
you have anything to add as we close?
Pay attention. Pay attention. Allow yourself to observe and note patterns. And that might be patterns within you that need to change. And that might be things you see in others that you have to actually pay more attention to. And may have to make some really hard decisions on that. But eventually, if you have to leave an abusive situation or if you have to pull away from a place of oppression, you will ultimately have more agency and more authenticity and more freedom.
Right. Cool. You
All
know
I
what we never
have to
talked
say
about?
about that.
Yeah, that's cool. We never talked about having an ending.
Oh, that's
Like,
true.
hey, deuces, or see you next week, or whatever it is. So let's think about that. Like, what will be our
Sounds good.
our ending?